same topic, different way of thinking about it, and a different lesson in here. I'm from Seattle, been here for about 30 years. And I'm going to tell you a little story today about two iconic Seattle companies. If you're not from Seattle, you may not recognize it. That's the Space Needle. It's kind of the mascot building of Seattle. All right, so we have two companies here. We have a lot of companies here, but two in particular. They were both at one point in their history the largest of their kind in the country. All right, so one of them is a nonprofit. One of them is a for-profit. Again, there were both, at least at one time, the biggest of their kind. They're both actually founded by college dropouts, both by the same college dropout. So that's a picture of Bill Gates. So this is how old he was when he founded Microsoft, right? He was a dropout of Harvard back then. He got to be the world's richest man. And so this is, of course, Microsoft and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So why is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation the biggest of its kind, and still is today? It's actually biggest for two reasons. One is they give away the most amount of money. So here's a graph from 2019. They haven't put out their 2020 report yet. Where do they send their money? Right. So they spend it mostly on global health and global development. And here's the breakdown again in chart form. It's come straight out of their annual report. And at the bottom, we have the bottom line for the foundation. The bottom line is they gave away $5 billion in 2019. I say that $5 billion. One organization in the US had enough money to give away $5 billion and still be in existence. Right? And that's what they did. They gave away $5 billion. It's up from 4 point something in 2018, up from 3 billion in 2015 or so. It's a rich organization. Well, how rich? Well, they have $49 billion, in the bank. They have $49 billion of assets. And that doesn't count the fact that Bill Gates is still the third richest American. He still has over $100 billion. He's already given $50 billion to this foundation, and he gives more every year. And on top of that, Warren Buffett, who's, I don't know, sixth or eighth or 10th richest American, that's the founder of Berkshire Hathaway, he gives $1 billion a year to this foundation as well. That's why they're the biggest. And they're the biggest by like a factor of 2. And then number 2, and I don't remember who it is bigger than number 3 by another factor of 2. This is the biggest by far. It's humongous. All right, Microsoft in comparison to Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So their 2020 revenues, just look this up, brand new, hot off the press this month. They did $143 billion of revenues just last year. Customers paid them $143 billion last year. They didn't get to keep all that, right? That was just their revenues. Their profits was $53 billion. So Microsoft earned last year more money than the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has. I'm going to say that one more time because I always find this to be flabbergasting. Microsoft, one company, Microsoft, which is the source of capital for here, right? Microsoft earned in profits more money than the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has ever. So this is kind of an apples and pears comparison, right? It's not really head to head. So if the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is worth $49 billion, well, what's Microsoft worth? Well, you can look that up. That's just their market cap, right? So if you take the share price of Microsoft multiplied by all the shares of Microsoft, they're worth $1.6 trillion. The reason I'm looking at this, and I started looking at this, was just to say, what's the difference in scale between the nonprofit world and the for-profit world? And so just taking this one guy, just taking one entrepreneur, happened to be the richest guy when I first started doing this. He's been passed up twice now. There's a huge difference in scale here. And the question then is, well, is that indicative of all the rich entrepreneurs, or does it get better or worse as we look at more of them? So let's go look at the top 100 charities, which happen to almost all be foundations, and the top 100 public companies, trying to get some apples to apples comparison here. So before we jump in and show you the numbers, who are the top 100 charities in the US? Right? Again, there's some bigger ones in Europe. If we take the top 100 in the world, we'd get a slightly different list, but I'm American and the data is easier to find for Americans. If we looked at who the founders of the foundations were, not the names of the foundations themselves. Where'd the money come from? Something pops out here. So literally, the biggest one is the Gates Foundation, funded by Microsoft. Sorry, number 2 is the Ford Foundation. Number 3 is the Paul G. Getty Foundation. Then the Robert T. Johnson Foundation, Johnson and Johnson. Then the Hewlett Foundation. Packard is in here too. They're a few slots down. We'll just use their logo once. Kellogg Foundation. I forget that Eli Lilly was founded by somebody's. The foundation is named after the guy. Then finally, so in that column just there, those are all entrepreneurs, right? Those are all this wealth came from, like Carnegie, entrepreneurs who started companies. Companies got huge. They gave away their money to a foundation. So they're just following the Carnegie model. Then we finally get to the first one, which is number 8 on the list here, that isn't an entrepreneur. It's a banker. But then we drop back to entrepreneurship, and we have one of the founders of Intel, then Andrew Mellon, right, from Carnegie Mellon, whose family did a whole bunch of banking stuff, but they also started Alcoa. Then we get to the first one that's not just a foundation from one person. It's the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. Something like $10 billion is sitting down there. And the biggest donor was Zuckerberg from Facebook and some of the other people from Silicon Valley. Then we get to the Bloomberg, and then finally we get to the first one that's real estate. And then another financial people. And then finally we get to the Rockefeller Foundation. The Rockefeller Foundation was Standard Oil, which spun off a whole bunch of companies, and on and on and on, right? And that's not 100. This is just the first 22. But when you look through the list, what you find is that nearly all the money that's sitting in foundations in the US is actually just winnings from entrepreneurship. It's winnings from investing in a form of entrepreneurship, which, is what we're talking about at the Angel Accelerator, funding startups. That's where the wealth comes from in the world in terms of philanthropy. So jump over to the other side. Well, who are the biggest 100 US companies? And I don't have a pretty graphic for that. This is not exactly it. This is just the biggest companies in each US state. Most of these are also top US companies. We can see, and I had to add a couple logos in here because California, Apple's the biggest, but Google and Facebook are also in California. Microsoft's the biggest was the biggest in Washington State, but Amazon's based here as well. You might recognize the Nike logo, ExxonMobil, of course, Coca-Cola, right? Comcast, GE. What else we have here? Walmart. Giant, big global companies. That's the top 100. You probably recognize 50 of them. The other 50 are be a little more obscure. Okay, so let's go back to our comparison here. So when you take the top 100 US foundations and you add up all of their wealth, all of the assets that they have under management, it's hard to find the exact number, but it's just shy of $300 billion total. Top 100 foundations combined is not as big as Microsoft. Again, Microsoft's value is $1.6 trillion. That's just one of the top 100 companies. When we take the total value of the S&P 100, which is the total value of the top 100 US companies as of this moment, it's $18 trillion. There's a huge spread, right? There's a vast difference in the amount of wealth that's over on the left, over on the philanthropy side, and over on the right side. But that's, again, it's hard to get an apples and apples comparison here, because $290 billion is all the money that the foundations have, but that's not all the amount of money that they put to work, right? So they only give away, it's a 7 or 8% of their money each year. So they invest it, they try and earn 8, 9, 10, 11% per year, and then they give away 7 or 8. You should think, let's say that one more time. They try and earn 9 or 10% per year on their investments, and then they give away 7. That just makes the foundations bigger and bigger slowly, but they're really only giving away it might be $22 billion. Remember, the Gates Foundation gave $5 billion out of the top 100. They gave away a quarter. So maybe my number's a little low. Maybe it's 22. Again, it's really hard to find the exact numbers. It was 20 a few years ago, so it's probably 22 now. But that means the Gates Foundation gave about 20% of all the money that was given away by the Gates Foundation. And the Gates Foundation, to bash on them a little bit, is following Carnegie's model really well. They think they know best. They think they know what the communities of the world need, and that's what they're funding. I don't think they're right about that, but I can't do anything about it. I don't have another, $5 billion to show them that they're wrong. In terms of this unexpected consequence that philanthropy is supposed to solve the problems of the world, let's just say, hypothetically, that we were going to take all this philanthropy and we were going to just try and solve global poverty. So we were going to take this money and we we're going to spend it only on the poorest people in the world. And let's just arbitrarily say $5 a day is poor. I don't want to live on $5 a day. I know some people live on less. And I know that the UN sets a global poverty rate at a ridiculously low $1.90 per day. I'm going to set it at $5 a day. And at $5 a day, half of the world is poor. Half the world lives on less than $5 a day. That's 3.5 billion people. So if we took all this money that was given away from the foundations, and there's more than just that, but if we just took their money and we used it to attack global poverty, we would have a budget of $5.71 per poor person per year, which isn't really enough to do much. It costs you more as a foundation to send somebody out to go talk to a poor person. It costs you more than $5 to go do that. It costs you more than $5 to get them a cook stove or a solar lantern or something that they could use to improve their life. It's not enough money, right? It's just way, 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 way too little money. So I get pushback when I first did this talk, and they said, well, what about the government money? Like, you forgot about all the money that the governments give. So I looked it up. The budget for USAID last year was $19 billion. Biggest pool of capital given away by a government anywhere in the world. And of course, there's more given away by other European powers and Asian powers. But this is the biggest pool we got, and I'm just doing American analysis here. All of the foreign aid flows through USAID in the US. There's military aid, but we're going to ignore that because it probably does more harm than good. But every single dime that flows to another country for the purpose of development flows through this one organization called USAID as part of the federal government. And their budget was $19 billion. And of course, they spent a lot of that on their own staff. It wasn't all given to poor people, but at least it nearly doubled the money that we're talking about. So now we're up to $39 billion. And so again, we do the same calculation. We take the 39 billion, we divide by 3.5 billion people. Our budget grew all the way to $11. It's just not enough money. There just simply isn't enough money to solve global poverty and hunger and health and the other 14 sustainable development goals. We just don't have enough money in philanthropy to do this. And then just to put some salt on this wound, I went and looked up the top 100 US advertisers. Top 100 advertisers only. I didn't look at all the advertising. And you'll know some of those brands. It's Coca-Cola, and Tide laundry detergent, which is Procter & Gamble. It might have a different brand in your home community, but you probably use Procter & Gamble's laundry detergent. They advertise a lot. That total advertising, the amount of money spent to get Americans to buy things we're already buying, was $189 billion last year. Again, that just dwarfs the amount of money spent on charity. And it's nowhere in comparison. Just be clear, this arrow's here because $16 trillion in terms of market cap of public companies doesn't fit on the page. If I made this $16 trillion, this line wouldn't even be 1 pixel tall. There just isn't enough money. All the money is over on the right side of the chart here. This is not even indicative of the difference here. All the money, right? Charity is a rounding error. Philanthropy is a rounding error. The money in the world is held by the corporations, the for-profit corporations that are, selling us stuff that we want to buy, not need to buy necessarily. And so, in conclusion, when I finished this analysis a few years back and finally understood this difference, that was the aha that said, oh, we have to break the paradigm. We can't expect the foundations to solve the problems. They don't have the money to do it. We have to change the paradigm and expect the companies to do this, which sounds crazy and sounds heretical to the norms of the world. But this is what impact investing is. Impact investing says that we can find some startups, we can find some young companies today that are doing good today, that have an impact and can grow, and give them 100 years of growth, which we don't have, but give them 100 years of growth, and they will be the big companies of the 21st century. And if they have the impact that they set out to do, they will solve the problems of the world, because they will have the resources to do that, because the big companies have resources. The big companies have trillions of dollars to put to work, and we need trillions of dollars to solve these problems.